So, Julia, where are you taking us to today?
I'm taking us to Liepāja, Latvia.
Very good. I'm looking forward to that. Tell us first, Julia, who you are and why you're here.
My name is Julia Konowgocka, and I'm joining the Letter from Brussels podcast to talk about different and interesting places in Europe, to see the reality of how the European Union is functioning on the ground.
Hello, Andre.
Hi, Sean.
Tell us who you are and why you're here.
I'm Andrei Lauter. I'm here to tell you about how mayors and regional leaders are helping to build our union's defense capabilities.
Well, thank you to both of you for joining me, Sean O'Kernan, here in the new studio of the European Committee of the Regions. Anyone watching on YouTube will be able to see our new setup. This studio is going to allow us to revamp the Letter from Brussels podcast, which I'd been producing on my own at home for about 3 years. And now, thanks to this studio, we can now produce it as a team, bringing in new voices from the Renew Europe political family. And of course, Renew Europe is the name of Europe's liberals, Democrats, and centrists. We're keeping the original concept of the podcast, bringing you stories about the EU's capital city, Brussels, and about the leaders transforming local communities all across the European Union. We're just going to do it in a different way. So every episode, Julia will take us somewhere where she has found something interesting that is happening on the ground. We'll get to know that place. And then we'll have an expert from the Renew Europe team or one of our political leaders to take us into the topic in more depth. And then we'll end the episode with my traditional letter from the Brussels capital region. So one thing we can guarantee is that you, the listeners or viewers, are going to get to know Europe like you've never known it before. So I suggest we just dive right in. Andre, tell us in one sentence, why is defense relevant to cities and regions?
When we think about European defense, our minds usually jump to national armies and these big leaders summit in Brussels. But the truth is, it's the cities and regions that are at the core. They're not out there fighting wars on their own, but they do provide the backbone of our defense by maintaining critical infrastructure, supporting defense production, and making sure civilians are prepared.
Okay, so let's all keep that thought in our minds while Julia takes us to Liepāja in Latvia. Tell us, where is it, what kind of place is it, and who is the mayor?
Well, Liepāja is a coastal town. It's a port city. It's on the western side of Latvia, so it's facing the Baltic Sea. It has a population of about 70,000, and the mayor is Gunārs Ansiņš.
So we're starting to get an idea of its location. If someone were to visit for the first time, what should they go and see? For example, myself, I love visiting museums and historical heritage. I know Andre likes cycling in natural surroundings. What would you recommend?
Well, I think it's a city where both of you will be able to find something. It has a beach, since I just mentioned it's on the Baltic Sea. So it's the perfect city to go to in the summer to relax, whether you're coming with your family or by yourself, just to enjoy the nature and the sun. But it's also a perfect place for history nerds. There's a lot of military sites, a lot of monuments and museums that explain the history of the city. I personally am a foodie. I always like to check if there's a local dish that's worth trying out in the place. And in this case, it's called Liepāja smencini, which is a sort of cold cod stew made in local bowls that are made. It's a ceramic that's painted by the local craftsmen. So it also combines different cultures in one.
Sounds delicious, and I'm already planning my visit in any case. What about the mayor, Gunārs Ansiņš? What can you tell us about him?
He's been the mayor since 2021, and he's the vice chair of the Liepāja political party, so from the city where he's the mayor. And the majority of his career, he's focused on environmental policies. So he's focused on transforming his own city so that it's climate neutral. And one of the ways he does this is also through the Covenant of Mayors, where he's an ambassador. And this is basically an association of local and regional politicians from all over Europe who are prioritizing environmental policies to prepare our planet for the future.
Okay, so we're all starting to imagine ourselves in Liepāja, perhaps in the company of Mayor Ansiņš. Why have you chosen to take us there today? What is it that you've spotted that's happening?
Well, what really caught my attention when I was preparing this edition of Street Field is that NATO is planning to invest 160 million euros to develop a new military port in Liepāja. And I find this really striking because I think it's a great example of how a local community, so in this case Liepāja, led by Mayor Gunārs Ansiņš, is suddenly at the center of Europe's security landscape.
Okay, before we look into that a bit further, you mentioned Streetfield. Can you tell us quickly what it is and what's special about it?
Absolutely. Streetfield is our newsletter. It comes out once a month, so every first Tuesday of the month. You can find it in your inbox. And we like to call it a snapshot rather than a newsletter, because what Streetfield does is it gives its subscribers a snapshot of what's really happening on the ground in local communities across the European Union. And of course, we focus on our liberal and our democratic leaders.
And if anyone who's listening would like to subscribe, how can they do that?
It's very simple. You can go to our website. So that's reneweurope-cor.eu and just click on the button that says Streetfield, where you can subscribe. Or you can go on our social media channels at Renew Europe COR and hit the subscribe button in the link in our bio.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, Letter from Brussels, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get back to this NATO port in Liepāja, Latvia. Andre, what do you make of that?
Well, it makes a lot of sense because just on the other side of Latvia, there's the town of Adaži, whose mayor is also our member, Vice President Karina Mikkelsone. And there is the biggest NATO base of the European Union's eastern border. Since May, for example, a multinational brigade, which is housed there and led by Canada, has expanded by an additional 600 allied soldiers. And this was possible through a Canadian investment of more than 18 million euros into the new barracks and accompanying infrastructure. So for me, it makes a lot of sense that the military port is being built in Liepāja to reinforce this NATO alliance's capacity to service this NATO base in the mid and long run.
I think at this point, we should make clear, of course, that the military buildup is about deterrence and not war. The proof is that Europe has been totally unprepared for the war that is happening in Ukraine, and it has become widely known and noticed and observed how European nations and European Union as a whole have neglected defense capabilities in recent decades. But the brutal attack by Russia on Ukraine has opened everyone's eyes to the fact that Europe and the European Union cannot take peace and security for granted. So, Andre, what exactly do we mean when we talk about deterrence?
Deterrence is essentially convincing somebody that waging a war against you will be too costly, that it's not worth for them. And when we talk about local and regional authorities, deterrence from the ground up is built through resilience of physical infrastructure, economic resilience, and also mental resilience. In wars, we often talk about morale. So cities and regions are at the core of it because they will ensure that the European energy, transport, and even information infrastructure, whether it's satellite or undersea cables, can survive intentional disturbance by the enemy. Just as well as the economic, the local economies need to survive, and the production of defense materials needs to also happen during the wartime and be delivered to the front.
So back to Liepāja. Julia, what else can you tell us about the military port that's being built there?
Well, a NATO-scale investment of this nature needs to be accompanied by improved transport links and modernized facilities. And this is where the mayor comes in, because it's the mayor that will play a key role in facilitating and supporting this infrastructure. But it's also interesting to note that it brings new development opportunities for the city, because we're talking about new jobs, opportunities for local businesses. And as we kind of discussed previously, it also puts the city on the map. And it's doing so in a new way, because it's turning it from a regional port into a strategic European hub.
And this illustrates perfectly how mayors and regional leaders are key to our military security. When we talk about dual-use infrastructure, it's because roads, railways, and ports that move weapons and troops are the same that citizens and businesses use in our daily life. These days, transport ministers and local and regional leaders across the EU are looking into bottlenecks across our EU corridors. And mind you, some of the critical infrastructure will have to be upgraded anyway because of adaptation to increasingly extreme climate events. So you have regions and cities that at the same time also invest in skills, research, and the university ecosystems that keep defense industry innovative and resilient. And for example, as a part of this 5% NATO spending commitment, Slovenia wants to renovate a hospital that will serve as a military hospital, but during peace times, of course, will bolster the health system in the country. So that hospital will have to be located somewhere. It will need roads, parking spaces, public transport, electricity, water, and internet, including cybersecurity. So all of this demonstrates how local and regional authorities are there, and they're indispensable as a pillar of Europe's security and resilience.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrei. Thank you, Julia. It's been fascinating, and I think we can all add Liepāja to our travel bucket list. And don't forget to subscribe to our Street Field Snapshot via our website and our social media. The latest one is just out, and in it you can find out why mayors and regional leaders are so very angry with the European Commission and its proposal for the next EU budget, which will disconnect the Union from its citizens if the plan goes ahead. You can read the letter that our President François de Coster sent to Renew Europe MEPs, explaining the problem in detail. And you'll also learn in the latest Street Field about drones making medical deliveries in Normandy, and more stories about how the Union is functioning on the ground. And now, as always, we'll finish with a story about the EU's capital, Brussels. It's a story which is very much related to what we've been discussing today. It's time for the letter from Brussels. There were a record number of applicants this year for Belgium's toughest university entrance exam. More than 1,000 young men and women put themselves through 3 days of medical tests, psychometric tests, physical fitness activities, one-to-one interviews, and academic exams in maths, French, Dutch, and other subjects. They were hoping to be offered a place in the Royal Military Academy, which trains future officers for the Belgian Armed Forces. According to Major General Roos de Potter, only the second woman ever to be in charge of the military academy, there is certainly a growing interest in defense matters amongst the general population, partly because of growing geopolitical tensions, and partly because renewed investments have made the military an attractive career option once again. The entrance exams take place just off the famous and historic Cinquantenaire Park of Brussels, and behind the permanent representations to the European Union of Romania and Slovakia. The Royal Military Academy has been at that location since long before the European Union was founded, and almost a century before Romania and Slovakia joined the Union and had to look for buildings that could house their representations in the EU's capital. In fact, back in 1909, when the military academy was transferred to its current location, it was considered to be at the eastern edge of the city. Today, it could almost be described as being part of inner Brussels. To anybody who walks past the Royal Military Academy along the edge of the park and pays attention to the names of the streets, they cannot fail to notice something unique and striking, in particular in the turbulent times that we live in. The western side of the military academy runs along a street named after Leonardo da Vinci, the 15th century artist, engineer, and inventor, most famous for painting the Mona Lisa, for his studies of anatomy, and for early designs of flying machines. It's often said that more than anybody else, Leonardo represents the Renaissance humanist ideals. The eastern side of the academy runs along a street named after the late Renaissance Dutch painter Hobbema, famous for painting idyllic rural landscapes, and whose most famous painting, The Avenue at Middle Harness, is found in London's National Gallery and once inspired Van Gogh. The southern side of the military academy runs along the Avenue of the Renaissance and a plaque on the Academy's facade pays tribute in French and Dutch to the flourishing of artistic creativity and scientific discovery in the 15th and 16th centuries. It's almost as if the Royal Military Academy is framed by artistic creativity and scientific discovery. And I like to think that with those street names, the people of Brussels are conveying a message, a subtle but powerful one, to the rest of the world. If humans everywhere, in particular those belligerent leaders who stoke up hatred and conflict, dedicated more time to the arts and the sciences, the world would be a more peaceful place to live in.